Grandpa asked him if he understood all of this. Langmo wiped his tears and told him he had followed every word and understood perfectly. Grandpa praised him and told him it was time for him to awaken. Suddenly, Langmo woke up on his chair and screamed for his grandpa. Bingu was watching him and jokingly asked what was wrong with the grandson. Langmo was annoyed and noticed the participants sitting around him. He had forgotten that it was a test and asked Bingu if he was done with his. Bingu informed him that he had already cleared it 2 hours ago as first place. Langmo was impressed and asked him if he had passed. Bingu confirmed it, saying that as long as you woke up by yourself, then you would qualify. He pointed to a group of people who were awake and told him they had all passed. Langmo felt like there seemed to be a lot of them. Bingu agreed, saying that he had been one of the slowest to pass. The examiner had said there was 1 more hour left before the exam ended. Anyone who didn't wake up by that time would fail. The examiner interrupted their talk and asked them to go to the rest area as they were interrupting others here. Langmo noticed that Sadila was still being tested, and Bingu could tell he was going through a lot. Looking at his face, Langmo could tell he was struggling. He wondered what his illusion was. According to the examiner, everyone saw a different illusion. These illusions all targeted one's deepest fear. It would present the most heartbreaking scenario that could happen to you. If you accepted it, then you could get out of the illusion. This made sense to Langmo, as his illusion had taught him so much. He asked Bingu what he had seen in his illusion and how he had managed to get out of it so quickly. Bingu began his tale of hardships where he was on an endless set of stairs. He was getting cold and hungry when he suddenly saw Langmo with a large, juicy piece of meat. He had tried to catch him, but he would just run away. In the end, he had finally managed to catch Langmo and had taken his meat. Langmo had then started crying and drooling from his mouth, so he decided to give him back his meat. He asked Langmo if he was touched by his pain. Langmo felt it was kind of weird, but he somehow felt glad. Bingu was not impressed with the face he was making. He admitted that he had told him everything without hesitation. Langmo responded by saying that he just didn't understand why his illusion had been so simple. Being simple seemed like the best thing to him. Bingu insisted that it wasn't simple at all and asked him what his illusion had been. Langmo told him everything about his illusion, but hid the part about the dwarves. Eventually, more and more people passed the test, but Sadila still hadn't woken up. The examiner announced the end of the exam and began canceling the illusions. Sadila woke up sweating. The examiner announced that those who were still in their chairs did not qualify. The participants in question felt extremely disappointed. Bingu told Langmo he felt bad for his friend since he had made it all the way here. He noticed that he looked lost and suggested Langmo go and cheer him up as his friend. Tears were flowing down Sadila's face. Langmo wondered if those were the tears of the result or something else. Sadila looked defeated. Langmo walked over to him and asked him how he was feeling. He advised him not to be so depressed, since he had tried his best. Sadila thanked him for his support and congratulated the two of them on passing. He swiftly got up and told them he was not feeling quite well and would come around to see them some other day. Langmo knew he could do nothing about it. He speculated that it must have sucked for him and that he must have encountered a tragedy. To some people, this test was a piece of cake, but to others, it could kill them. Bingu gave him a look of annoyance, accusing him of calling him dumb. The examiner announced that the 15 people standing had qualified and congratulated them. They were now going to be facing the last exam, which would be held 3 days from now. He asked them all to rest up during this time. Whoever survived the last exam would become an arbitrator. Langmo and Bingu were glad to finally have reached the final exam and were wondering what it was going to be. The examiner told them he would explain its details in a moment and told them to listen carefully. He announced that it was going to be free for all combat. The participants began an uproar, asking if it was an all-out fight with no rules and if there was going to be only one winner. The examiner told them to calm down. Since there were going to be judges who would rate their fights based on their actions, there was no number limit to how many could qualify. As long as you showed your value, you could qualify even if you lost. He asked them to not be scared of being picked on. Rather, being picked on could help the judges notice you. That was all he was revealing for today. Bingu turned to Langmo, saying he was thinking about having a duel with him. Langmo was thinking the same thing and told him he couldn't wait. The two of them decided they were going to rest for these 3 days, and Bingu added that he was going to eat his BBQ. Langmo reminded him that they were enemies now, and he should be worried Langmo might poison him. Bingu refused it, saying they were only going to be enemies in 3 days. Sadila had returned to the Fragrant Wing Empire's royal palace. He was in distraught. He had seen his father in the illusion and had been begging him to wake up. He wanted to know who had done this to him. A voice interrupted him, telling him that he was still as useless as always, and that he only knew how to cry. It was the fourth prince. He claimed that the old man was already dying and there was nothing to cry about. Sadila asked him if he was the one who had done this. He questioned why he would do such a thing. The prince asked him when he would stop being such a baby. He expressed that he felt like there was nothing wrong with clearing things that had gotten in his way. Sadila shouted at him to reconsider what he was saying. The man he had just wounded was their father. Just then, someone whispered in his ear that he was angry and asked him to kill Brunat, the fourth prince. Sadila turned around to see Caesar standing behind him and asked him how he could say such a thing. Caesar asked him what was wrong about that. Their father was dead, and there was only one throne for all of them. He reminded him that they were the closest brothers, so he could help him kill Brunat. Brunat interrupted him, saying that Caesar was useless. He wanted Sadila to join him instead. Caesar recalled how Sadila had wanted him to be the king and urged him to kill Brunate. Sadila responded by saying that he did want him to be the king, but he didn't want any of them to die. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. Tears had started flowing from his eyes and he woke up panting. He didn't want to let any of this happen. He realized he was too weak to face the truth, but the illusion had made him realize the importance of this situation. He could not allow his siblings to kill each other at any cost. He needed to find a way to stop it from happening. 3 days passed and the finalists were gathered up in the arena. Everyone seemed to be in an elevated state. Bingu and Langmo noticed their deadly looks and figured they must have been cramming really hard. This was obviously the last exam, so they were going to do whatever they could. Bingu just hoped that they didn't get in their way. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have the chance to show their faces in front of the judges. A voice called out to them, congratulating those who had made it to the last exam. He introduced himself as the president of the Arbitrator Association, and he was also the person in charge of the exam. He told them they had all been made aware of what the exam was. It was a free-for-all battle with no rules, no time limits, and fighting until the last person stood alone. Participants were free to surrender at any time. The judges would compare their behavior during the fight. Those who stood out would become arbitrators. They were going to have 5 masters acting as judges today, giving out scores and such. Bingu and Langmo noticed both of their masters up there. This must have meant that the others were probably the same level as them. The president asked each of them to pick a spot and announced that the exam would start in 10 seconds. Everyone quickly positioned themselves away from the pair. This was good enough for them since they now had enough room for dueling uninterrupted. Bingu told Langmo to get ready, and Langmo responded likewise. Bingu admitted that he hadn't gone all out for a while now, and he was looking forward to it. Langmo responded by saying that it was the perfect opportunity for him to show Bingu his training. The final exam had begun. Bingu couldn't believe they were fighting so soon again. They hadn't been able to settle things at the academy last time. Langmo told him to be careful since he was different from back then. Even though they had had the same experience, his growth had been far greater than Bingu's. The president was admiring their youth. At such a young age, they had already managed to become great sword masters. Their teachers had taught them well. The principal felt proud. Bingu told him it was enough talking, and now was the time to see who was the strongest. The two of them charged their auras, but before they could act, a pair of participants leapt at them, trying to use this opportunity to get a surprise attack. They had figured they would get a good score for defeating either of them and try to get in unnoticed. The other participants contemplated if they should join them. The attackers thought they had outsmarted them, but ended up getting knocked out instead. The other participants were amazed. It had only taken both of them one punch to finish the job. The attackers flew away and smashed the arena wall, getting disqualified for being out of bounds. The participants could tell that Langmo and Bingu were at least great swordmaster level. They were not the kind of people to mess with. They figured they should just fight there between themselves. The president commended Firely and Bilinasi on having such impressive apprentices. Bilinasi told him that they were just show-offs. Since the others were not going to bother them anymore, Langmo decided to start. He released his fiery aura. The president was impressed by how he had learned so much at such a young age. He dashed towards Bingu, ready to strike. The president could not believe that Firely had even taught him the tyrant broadsword. Firely laughed it off, saying that he still had a lot to learn. Langmo swung his sword at Bingu, causing the ground to break around them. The arena was falling apart, but people were still impressed by their moves. Firely noticed that Langmo had even managed to improve on his 3-style tyrant broadsword technique. It seemed to him that his apprentice was better, and the president called him a genius. Bilinasi told him to stop acting so dramatic. The fight had just started. Langmo admitted Bingu's dodging skills were pretty decent. Bingu pointed out that they had just begun fighting, but he had already used his best technique. He asked him if he wanted to win that badly. He figured he should cool Langmo down. A strange fog started to appear in the arena. It was apparently an ice fog that froze. The participants were unable to see anything. The principal was annoyed that his wife had already taught him the ice fog jitsu, not to mention that he had already mastered it. She asked him if he still thought that her apprentice was not as talented as his. She jokingly added that he was lucky he had a master like her who could teach him more than one skill. Ares retorted, saying that even though he had only taught him one move, it was more than enough. She pointed out that he had only had 3 moves the entire time she had known him. He accused her of lying. The president was silently listening to their bickering and was worried he would have to pay for the repairs of the ground again. Meanwhile, Bingu commented on how the ice fog jutsu was so overpowered and that he could easily see everyone's movements. It was now his turn to attack, and he aimed his magic towards Langmo. An icy tornado appeared, heading straight for him. This was the first time Firely was seeing this move, and he asked her what it was called. She told him it was his original move. The ground began shaking again, and the participants were beginning to think that Langmo and Bingu were insane. Langmo could tell something was wrong as he felt a strong aura coming from above. Bingu had most likely made his move. He looked up to see a massive ice tornado heading towards him. He figured this must have been his original attack. If this was the case, then he would show him his original as well. The two forces violently clashed. Shockwaves erupted, sending rubble flying all around them. The arena had been completely destroyed. The president was not pleased with this situation. The other participants were even more angry at them, calling them insane for making the stadium explode. Firely could not believe that his student had acquired an original move. Bilinasi complimented his student's intellect that was so unlike his master. She told him he was nothing without his apprentice. He asked her if she was admitting that his apprentice was better, and she shouted at him to not get so cocky. All the meanwhile, the president was just worried how much the repairs were going to cost. Langmo and Bingu's formidable presence could be felt throughout the arena. The participants were feeling like they were going to be knocked off their feet and want each other to stay away from the pair. Their fight was sending rubble flying everywhere. A few students had been knocked out of the arena, but their fight there seemed to have intensified even more. Someone wondered how they had not exhausted their aura already. Their fighting had become so intense that it had started to look like explosions. Even the principal was overwhelmed, watching them while the president looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Finally, the smoke cleared, and the arena came into full view. It appeared to be fully obliterated. Langmo was impressed with Bingu's tornado. Bingu told him he wasn't half bad either. Langmo admitted that it had been an awesome fight, and he had almost lost. He figured he must have been out of aura by now. Bingu told him it must have been the same for him. He sighed, thinking it was a tie. Langmo told him to stop spouting nonsense, claiming that he had won. Bingu asked him if he really had any aura left. He told him he didn't need any aura. He was still standing in the arena while Bingu was out of it. This meant he was automatically the winner. Bingu protested, saying that it couldn't be coined as out as he was still in the same area. Langmo disagreed, saying that he was obviously out and that he had been protecting his space all along. Firely started laughing. He had always believed in Langmo. He could finally show that his apprentice was better than his wife's. Bilinasi told him she didn't want to talk to him and asked the president to announce the results. The president went straight to it and officially announced that Langmo had achieved first place in the final exam of the arbitrator test. He started celebrating, but Bingu called him shameless. Since everyone else had failed to prove their worth, the president announced that they had all failed. Judging from their performance, Langmo and Bingu were the only ones to be qualified as arbitrators. Langmo tried to cheer Bingu up, saying that he had made it as well. The president asked Mr. and Mrs. Firely to award the approval certificates. The two of them entered the arena and congratulated their respective students. Firely congratulated Langmo on his victory and told him he hoped he would become a sword saint someday. Bilinasi tried to console her student, saying that she would teach him some new moves after they got back. Firely pointed out that it didn't matter how many moves she taught him, since he had still lost to his apprentice. She asked him if he wanted to fight. He told her not to get mad and made fun of her, saying that she just needed to learn how to accept failure. She hinted that he was sleeping on the sofa tonight. That way he would learn some manners. He began apologizing and told her he didn't mean it. Langmo and Bingu were silently listening to them. The president interrupted them and asked if they could present the certificates now. Bilinasi had almost forgotten about that and ordered her husband to give her their IDs. She handed them their cards, which was going to be proof that they were arbitrators. With this, they could now enter a lot of locations prohibited to commoners. She congratulated the two brats on becoming arbitrators and asked them to guard their IDs with their lives. The two were making their way out of the arena. Bingu told Langmo they were having a rematch after he had recovered. Langmo agreed to his request. Just then, he noticed someone get off a carriage. It was the second Prince Caesar. He congratulated both of them for becoming arbitrators and told them that he had been waiting. Langmo thanked him for his kind words. He informed him that he had been planning a visit. Caesar recalled the explosions he had heard in the arena and had inferred that it was the two of them battling, so he decided he would come for a visit. Langmo thanked him for doing so, and he asked the two to follow him back to his palace. The group made their way back in the carriage. Caesar let them know how impressive they had been. He had doubted them at first, but it seemed like he had nothing to worry about. Lang admitted that he was just lucky. After all, he had almost been eaten by a demonic beast. Caesar told him he was being humble. Luck was sometimes part of one's strength, according to him. Since they were both arbitrators now, he decided he would get straight to the point and ask them when they were planning to come work for him. He couldn't wait to see how they would perform under him after seeing their battle. Just then, someone interrupted them to bring Caesar some important news. Caesar was annoyed he was interrupting his guests, but the attendant insisted that the matter was really important.